There we go. So, would you rather you and a partner takes turns asking each other to choose one option between two equally unpleasant things? Got that? Would you rather do this or would you rather do that? You had to choose. And both of them you don't want. It's an interesting way to get better acquainted. Now, I'm going to give you some examples, and it could go on forever, but I'll just give you 3, maybe 4. I don't know. Could throw in 5. Would you rather be wealthy, but only able to walk everywhere, like if you have a fear of flying or that you have severe motion sickness and all you can do is walk? Or would you rather be broke, but able to travel anywhere in the world? You have to choose one. Which one would you choose? Would you rather always have an annoying song stuck in your head, like from a TV commercial or something? Or would you rather have an itch that you can't reach? Would you rather be trapped on a desert island with someone who speaks all the time and never stops? Or would you rather be trapped on a desert island with someone who doesn't speak at all? So one of them never shuts up, never doesn't say anything. Which one would you rather be trapped on a desert island with? Now, I probably can't guess what you think to answer these questions because neither one of the options are good. Perhaps there is one would you rather question that is pretty easy for everyone to answer. Would you rather move to another town, another state, or another country, or get a root canal? I'd go for the root canal. I don't know about you guys, but moving is horrible. You could replace root canal with anything, you know, a list of sorted unpleasant options. And most people will still choose anything rather than moving. Just ask somebody about their last move and see how they respond. And I know you've heard this before and you've probably said it. I'll never do that again. I'll never move again. I'll just die right here. I'm not moving. Or another common response is, I don't even want to talk about it. Now, let me give you one last, well, maybe not, one last would you rather. Would you rather move to the nursing home to live, or would you rather move into a homeless shelter? That sounds absurd, doesn't it? Maybe, but the stress that is involved is the same. A woman named Renee wrote in a real estate blog and shared the stressful move she and her husband had made years ago. Now, envision this. On the day they were supposed to move, there was a blizzard. Now, Renee lived with her husband on top of this hill. And the driveway was really steep to get up to the house. But what a view they had. You could see down to the road, and across the road was a river, and there was trees and forest all around. Beautiful place. I don't know why they'd want to move. But anyway, the blizzard struck. So they decided, hey, we'll do this ourselves. So they go get a big U-Haul but they couldn't back it up the driveway. So they had to leave it down on the road. Now they had a four-wheel drive vehicle, so they started putting everything in the four-wheel drive truck, going down to the van and putting it in the van. Now that went along very well until the sofa in the truck fell out, rolled down the hill, across the road, and into the river, never to be seen again. Yeah, I don't know about that. Moving is a major stressor, whether you're moving yourself or moving somebody else. You stress out over it. Causes you a lot of grief. Back in the late 60s, two psychiatrists studied the records of more than 5,000 medical patients to determine if recent stressful events in their lives might have contributed to their illnesses. Out of this work, they created the Social Readjustment Stress Scale. And it's got another name. A tool that ranks 43 most stressful events the average person could face in life. Of course, number one, death of a spouse, ranks number one. Change in living conditions such as divorce, fire, hurricane, tornado, whatever else you can think of that causes you have to change your living conditions, ranks number 28. But change in residence is in that group, and it ranks number 32 on the list. Think about that combination of stressful events of life. As we unfold this lesson this morning, the story of Naomi and Ruth. They suffered all these negative life events and more. Many of us are experiencing these emotional and physical events today. Our nation mourns for normal, not the new normal of socialism, but the normal as our founding fathers gave us in our Constitution. Would you rather live in a socialist country, or would you rather live in a communist country? That is not a question. Both I wouldn't rather do. Our story begins with a family in distress. The family consists of Elimelech and his wife, Naomi, and their two sons. And like many families today, this family was experiencing some economic difficulties. A famine had spread through their land, and food was scarce. The Walmart and the Kroger's were all out of food. Shelves were empty. So Elimelech and Naomi packed up a small U-Haul and moved to Moab, where there was more food in the Walmart and the Kroger. One day, not too long ago, or not too long after they got there, Elimelech died unexpectedly. By this time, both sons had met local girls and were married. Then both sons also died. All this happened within a relatively short span of time. Naomi was devastated. Opportunities for women in that day and time were practically non-existent. Naomi left all alone in a foreign country. All she had left was two daughter-in-laws. How would she survive? The only viable option was for her to return to her hometown and hope there would be a place for her somewhere among her relatives. And so she and her two daughter-in-laws set out for the land of Judah. As the three widows began their journey, it occurred to Naomi that it might be better for her daughter-in-laws to remain in their own country. You think? This would not rank as a would you rather. And I'll tell you why in a minute. Have you ever stopped to examine how stress and fear and grief affect the decision-making process? That's why grief counselors often advise people not to make major decisions like moving to a new city or selling your house or quitting your job for at least a few months after a major loss or setback. The stress, fear, and sadness brought on by death or another major life event can drive us to seek expedient solutions, not effective ones. And they cause us to turn, due to the pressure, away from God. Preparation ahead of certain major life events, which cause stress, fear, and grief, and which result in ineffective decisions, is prudent. Like funeral arrangements, or living wills, or trusts, or gifting, or a personal will, or insurance, or retirement. Consulting with someone who loves you before the major event occurs might be the most effective approach. In her grief and fear, Naomi did not see how God could be working in her life. She could not see any hope for the future. And that's a dangerous place to be. So she encouraged her daughter-in-laws to go back to their mother's house, Daughter-in-laws going back to their moms. They were still young. They could find new husbands and have security she could not give them. Naomi loved her daughter-in-laws, and she wanted to see them happy. And as she sent them away, she kissed them, and the three women wept. Now, I have a confession. I've read and heard this story preached, I don't know how many times, but never have I grasped the depth of its teaching until now. It was always, to me, like a Hallmark movie, interesting in the beginning, but predictable as to how it would end. However, Ruth and one of her daughter-in-laws, Naomi, wanted to stay with her. She protested, and she didn't want to go back. The other daughter-in-law went back. But Naomi knew a sad truth. Her daughter-in-law would not be accepted by her family in her home country because they were Moabites. The law was very clear about such things. No Moabite could enter the household of faith even after 10 generations. You find that in Deuteronomy 23:3. If her daughter-in-law remained with her, they would never be accepted among the people. So Naomi once again encouraged her to go home. She told her that it was absurd for her to follow her. She said, "Do I still have sons in my womb that they can become your husbands?" Finally, the one daughter-in-law went back. She decided that her mother-in-law was right. It would be best for her to remain in her own country. Ruth, however, still wanted to stay with Naomi. And Ruth loved Naomi deeply. It was in this context that Ruth spoke some of the most famous words in all literature. And what were those words? "Where you go, I will go," she told Naomi. "And your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. The story of Ruth and Naomi is what love's all about. And that's what this lesson is all about. It's about loyalty and faithfulness and mutual devotion. Love that endures through any challenge. That's love, isn't it? It's not, I love you for what you can do for me. It's not, I love you as long as it's convenient for me. It's, I love you no matter what. Go back with me to the spring of 1969. Now, some of you can't do that because you weren't around then. You were just a soul. But that's for another lesson. In 1969, our nation was rocked by the Vietnam War. The assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy. Then as now, there was much unrest due to social upheaval. Peace was hard to find. These events weighed heavily on a songwriter named Paul Simon. And he wrote the lyrics for one of Simon and Garfunkel's most popular songs, Bridge Over Troubled Water. You remember those lyrics? When you are weary and feeling small, when tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all. I'm on your side when times get rough and friends just can't be found. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. When you're down and out, when you're on the street, when evening falls so hard, I will comfort you. I will take your part when darkness comes and pain is all around, like a bridge over troubled water. Some of you probably remember that. I can still hear that going in my head. Paul Simon's song is a powerful picture of loyal, faithful, devoted love. When things are falling apart in your world, he's saying, I will be there to comfort and protect you. That's the promise that Ruth made to her mother-in-law, Naomi. And by the way, there's another verse in Paul Simon's song, one that you probably don't remember that's in there. It goes like this. Sail on, silver girl, sail on by. Your time has come to shine. Now, what's that all about? Somewhere it's written that Simon was paying homage to his beloved wife, who at the time was beginning to have some gray, well, might say silver hair. Silver. He wanted her to understand that in his eyes, she was as beautiful as always. This is love at its deepest and its richest. Ruth committed to her mother-in-law, even when there was nothing for her to gain and everything to lose. When they reached Bethlehem, Naomi's hometown, Naomi's relatives greeted her fondly, but she told them, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, which means bitter, for my life has been a bitter one. You got to respect Naomi for her honesty. You know, we're more comfortable with people who grieve privately, who put on a brave face and never talk about what's tearing them up inside. But that's not healthy. Author Lynn Kane wrote in her best-selling book, Widow, after the death of her husband, In it, she writes, being a widow is like living in a country where no one speaks your language. The first priority for Ruth and Naomi became survival. Farmers in that day left a portion of their crops in the field. Widows and the poor were allowed to come into this section of the field and gather up the grain and vegetables or fruits. This practice was known as gleaning, and for many folks, it could mean difference between starvation and survival. Naomi had a relative named Boaz in Bethlehem, and he allowed Ruth to glean his fields. Boaz came to admire Ruth's character and also her devotion to Naomi, and he eventually married her. Ruth and Boaz had a son, named him Obed. Obed was the grandfather of King David. It was through his family line that Jesus, the Messiah, was born. Isn't that interesting? That in the lineage of Jesus, there is a Moabite woman named Ruth. The very people that the writer of Deuteronomy would forbid entrance to the promised land. The grace of God permitted to not only enter the land, but allow it to be part of the bloodline of the promised Messiah. She is there because of her loyalty to her mother-in-law. That is heart of the lesson today. That kind of love is what the cross is all about. It's about a love that never quits, never gives up, never fails. It is a sacrificial love from the heart of God. It's not, I love you for what you can do for me, or I love you as long as it's convenient for me. It's, I'll love you no matter what, and I'll always be there for you. Dr. David Wilhelm wrote in this book in 2020 his little portion of RX for soul, like chicken soup. And he shares his story of sacrificial love he witnessed in the lives of two elderly patients, Fred and Ruby. Ruby had advanced Alzheimer's, and she became more angry and difficult as the disease progressed. But Fred continued to nurse his wife lovingly. Fred devoted himself to her care, even though Ruby could no longer return his love. And then one day, Fred ended up in the hospital. He had late-stage cancer, colon cancer. Fred admitted to Dr. Wilhelm that he had known about this diagnosis for over a year. He had refused treatment because he needed all the energy and money to take care of Ruby. Her needs came first. He was willing to suffer and even die to ensure that Ruby would get the best care possible. Now think of the cross. The cross of Jesus is the ultimate symbol of love that will never give up on us. A love that will give up everything to save us. And you and I are the recipients of that love. Over the past 2022 years, folks just like us have believed in that love. And they passed that love on through plagues and wars and famines, oftentimes under barbaric oppression. They did not let it go. And we are the recipients of that love. It would be tragic if we didn't pass it on. It would be tragic if we lost the joy of sharing Jesus' love with others. He gave all of us, all of himself, to show us God's overwhelming love for us. And the only thing Jesus asks in return is that we share the same love with others. One of the world's greatest love stories between a widow and her daughter-in-law. Let it remind us that the greatest love is a love that's sacrificial and self-giving. It flows from the heart of God. Never, ever, never give up on love. And all God's people said, amen.